Hello everyone! Okay, where do we find female samurai? Now I've been asked by a lady called Holly about female samurai and finding female warriors and everything within Japan. So I said to her, let me do you a little video and try and give you some, pointers about a possible future book. So if you are interested in female samurai and actually samurai who are not Japanese and Western, then you can get this Old Japan. It's a book I brought out with History Press, and do get yourself a copy. Dead easy to read. It's got some stuff on women in there. Not loads, but it's basically got a bit of everything, bit of this, bit of that. So get yourself a copy of Old Japan. Okie dokie, right. So, where are all the female warriors in Japan? Well, we have to be very careful here, because there weren't that many. There are some, and there are some great examples of them, but there are also not that many. So I'm going to start on a bit of a not a negative slant, but a bit of a cautionary slant. Like when I get sort of requests like this about do the black samurai, Anthony, do female samurai, I'm like, that's just following trends. And what you have to be careful with is that when people focus too much on a trend or a political idea, it twists history. So the next thing you know, you've got all the Japanese in the background and there's the black samurai there who's the saviour, or even the white samurai, Andrew Adams, him as the saviour or whatever, like Tom Cruise. So you got to be careful. And then especially now we're in 2021, so it is literally female centric at the minute. So, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't look for them, but we should be careful of why we're looking for them. So, and especially not to skew history. So, for example, I've spent 10 years looking for ninja, but I have to constantly focus and fix myself back to a centre and remember that ninja are only a small part of samurai life. So actually, ninja, as much as ninja information I put out here, they're only a small part. If you were walking around in everyday Japan, the amount of ninjas you would bump into would be very few and far between. You might know of a couple, because some of them were out, in the open and said who they were, but you wouldn't be hanging around with them, or you wouldn't know many, or they wouldn't really be in your life. So you've got to be careful not to skew things. So, were there female warriors? First of all, samurai is a class, basically. It is a samurai class. So there are, and they say the samurai population is about 10%. Now, I haven't checked the stats on this, but logically that implies that 5% are men and 5% are women, because women were samurai. You have to be careful here what we mean by the word samurai. So we got the word bushi, which is military warrior, basically, military gentleman. And then you also get samurai, those who serve. Originally they are different, but then they come to mean the same thing. So bushi, samurai become the same thing. But it is a hereditary class, and you can get into that class as well. So this idea that all samurai are men is ridiculous. It's not true. Samurai are also women, but they're women of the samurai class. They're not military bushi, they're not military people. Now, we do know that yin-yang is a massive part of Japanese culture, and that having yin energy, female energy, around a yang thing, which is war, is considered bad. And we know that texts say, oh, don't take women to war, this is the wrong energy. When you leave for war, don't have women at the gates, it's the wrong energy. You need lots of lads, masculine energy, going off to war. Now, of course, there are a few famous samurai women. We don't know whether they're real or not real, but we'll go with they're real, because some people have said they may have been made up for literature. They may not. So Holly, be careful if you just assume people are real. They may not be. They may also be literary figures who are considered real, like Lancelot. We all have heard King Arthur is actually a real person. He wasn't the king we all thought he was, but there's probably a guy called Arthur. But there's probably never been a guy called Lancelot who hung around with Arthur. He was a French invention. This is from memory. Same as Guinevere was a French invention. Guinevere, Arthur, Guinevere, Lancelot, they're all French-esque. It's because the Arthurian tales were being told in Norman society, which is a French-speaking society, and with the Richard the Lionheart was as much French as he was English, and these people are talking about, this type of thing. They start adding these features in. So there is no real Guinevere, but there probably was a real Arthur, a Welsh 6th century warlord, most likely, not a Middle Ages Arthurian sort of like knight of valor. So you have to be careful there, Holly. That you don't just add people who randomly because we think they're real. The other one is there's been some scientific discoveries on female bones in a house where they were victims of sword strikes and everything, and people said, oh, these... I remember watching this documentary, it's like the women were defending themselves. Of course they were. Who wouldn't? You imagine, like, somebody's breaking into your house, they've murdered all the men who are on the front gate, and the next thing, the women are pulling down naginatas and smashing at them, and it's like... What would they do? They just sit there, carry on sewing until they get their heads chopped off. Not at all. Of course they're going to defend themselves. So you definitely get women in violence. There's going to be lots of violence towards women. And there's going to be lots of women giving violence back towards men. There's the famous ladies that were like a troop towards the end of the 1800s who definitely picked up and went in and wore a troop of women. Absolutely. But they seem to be an isolated case. So do we find women in war? Yes, we do. But there's not... If you look at the demographics of Japan over 1,000 years, the amount of samurai military combatants that were male is 99.999999999%. People who got killed in houses after the houses were being raided, 50-50 probably. You've got 50% women, 50% men, but could have happened to anyone. Of course they're going to fight. Famous figures, there's a handful. So yes, Holly, yes, there are female military combatants. They are very few and far between. They are scattered among the histories, which you'd have to dig for. There is plenty of females who were given, sort of like victims of violence and who defended themselves, and we can find this in the archaeological record. But this is where it takes me to my next step, is that the men are evil and women are wonderful. Yay, power to the women. This is so not true. So basically, everybody says females had it really bad in samurai times. That's such a modern way of looking at it. It's just totally redundant and ridiculous. People had a bad time in Japan. This is where they get this wrong. It does wind me up a bit. It's like the women were downtrodden by the evil men. Hold on a minute. Let's do some thinking, shall we? So, the samurai class are above the farmer class, okay? And the other classes. So, the farmer class are probably about 90% of the population, 80% of the population. It's a big chunk of the population. Hold on a minute. The samurai are above them. And half of the samurai population are women. So, the women, half of the samurai women are above the rest of the population. Okay. So it was never a case of women were lower than men. It was a case of women in the samurai caste were lower than men, but higher than the other people who were like the sandal bearer. You didn't go to a samurai house and the lady of the house was like bowing to the sandal bearer, who's a man, by the way. Wasn't bowing to the groom of the horses, who's a man, by the way. She is the lady of the house. She gets her authority from the man of the house because it's a patriarchal system. It's absolutely... You cannot change history, guys. You cannot change history. History is history. Doesn't matter what it is. That's what it is. So... basically, you also get extremely powerful women who, again, are based on being with extremely powerful men. Let's look at the wife of Tokugawa Ieyasu. Yep, the lady, I forgot her name, Lady something. She basically was a massive politics player, probably in a lot of deception, a lot of power, a lot of political movement, and in the end Tokugawa took her head off along with killing his own son, probably because she was a nagging wife, to be fair. Let's be honest. He's like, oh, she's nagging a bit much. Off the head comes. He's doing not in this lad, he's not got his head screwed up. Off that comes, and it's like done. So you're like, it isn't that there aren't powerful women. There are extremely powerful women in Japan, but the most powerful people are men. But that means that some of the women were way more powerful than 80% of the men. But that the men in this lower half were higher than the women here. But then you go to the outcast system. Any female within the caste system is higher than a female or a male of the outcast system. So that's the problem with trying to do modern political agenda to history. We didn't live like that. India now still has its caste system and people are sort of getting rid of that, but it has a caste system. It isn't there's like 50% over here and 50% over here and the women are like got no teeth and they've been like, walking around like Frankenstein going, I'm being oppressed, and like, I don't know why I'm American, I'm being oppressed, me Billy Joe, and so I don't know why we would assume that. Obviously, people assume life is like it was then. Yes, humans are humans. Yes, people get hungry. Yes, they get in love. Yes, they get angry. They're all those human things. But actually, medieval life was very stratified. And if you weren't in a certain place, a certain time, you couldn't get there. Same as here in the UK. If 100 years ago, 1920s, if you were not part of the middle upper class, you were not becoming an officer. You were the grunt, and it doesn't matter what your family did, unless they were entrepreneurs, and then, you know, you get the rags to riches stories. But on the whole, the lads were downtrodden, working in the mines, bringing home money for the woman, who was, like, you know, downtrodden as well, by other powerful women. Elizabeth I is one of the most powerful women in English history. Didn't really do much for women, did she? She sort of just was the most powerful woman. So we have to... So my thing to you, Holly, is be careful how you approach the research of that. Be wary of who's actually there. Do not skew history. You're going to find it really difficult because the men didn't want women involved, but even if the women did get involved, the men would push it down a bit, because it's like, that's a bit weird, because that was weird in their society. And of course, don't just look at violence towards women and say, oh, they're fighting back, and oh, these are warrior women. No, everyone fights back. It doesn't matter who you are. If you are mugged, burgled, whatever, you go in there, don't you? Especially if you can pull a naginata down and you're allowed to kill. Imagine if the burglar comes in the house and my wife was just like, there's a big dirty sword on the side, which there is right there, and the burglar's coming in and she's just like straight through him. You're like, you know, would you say she's a warrior woman? No. So they are warrior women. Most women were not warriors. Most women were not under the oppression. Many women were not under the oppression of men, but a lot of women were inside a caste system, and the caste system was 4-tiered, and it was, so there's the 4 tiers, and it's slightly off with men at the top, women there, and then there's interplay between it all. But on the basic level, you've got like the caste system, and at the bottom of it all is the outcasts, and the bottom of all that is the female outcasts, who are just thrown on corpses, piles and things like that. So I hope that helps, Holly. Please, good luck with your research. I hope that's not put you off, because you should do it, because as I say, it is a good subject, but make sure it's in context. And for those who've got to the end, get yourself a copy of this guy's Old Japan. Tons of little bits of information in there. It's even got the forward by Lord Resdale, which was superb. I was very happy with him for that. All right, guys, thank you very much.